A lot about artificial intelligence and your projects you are doing. I am sure a lot of people out here are wondering, what exactly is AI? I mean, what do you need to do? You know, how does it even happen? Is it like I need to put a brain in the computer? Because everybody says it's like AI is like putting brain into computer. Yes. It could take its own decision. But what exactly is it?
Sure. Now, artificial intelligence, I mean, a lot of people have this misconception of what AI truly is. And that's why I always like to clarify that artificial intelligence isn't this sort of really biological, generally intelligent entity. In fact, even while I was in New Zealand for the Watson Summit, there was a child that asked me, does Watson actually, have legs? Is it a living thing? And so that's why I always like to sort of clear this misconception. Artificial intelligence itself is a set of algorithms that allow us to take a little bit of our natural ability to think, to make decisions, and give that to computers so that they can learn from their experience, so that they can make new decisions based off of new information that they've never seen before. But then again, we don't just want the computer to make decisions. We want it to make decisions so that we can actually use that as another data point. We don't want them to make decisions on our behalf. We want them to make decisions so that we can actually modify or change our decisions based off of theirs.
So you mean to say I don't need to have any magical powers to learn artificial intelligence? That's
Not at all. Not at all.
Okay, so since we've got two data scientists sitting with on my right, I'm a computer science engineer, I'm not a data scientist. I want you to tell people in very, very simple terms on how on daily basis we are using the power of AI, but we don't know it. Be very crisp so that we can take audience questions. Both of you, please.
Okay. So I'll start. So a lot of people think that AI is for the future. Maybe 10 years down the line, people are talking, something will happen. But let me tell you, everybody over here is influenced, is impacted or controlled by AI at this moment. When you go to Amazon to buy something, you don't know what you want to buy. But Amazon knows what you would like to buy. And 6 out of 10 times, people tend to buy what Amazon recommends. So that is AI, that is machine learning.
Exactly. And now actually expanding on that, let's talk about actually buying things on Amazon. Now when you buy things on Amazon, you're probably using, say, a credit card to buy things on Amazon. Now the thing is, when you actually buy things, say using your credit card anywhere, not just on Amazon, what's happening is, of course, you're sending your request to your credit card company, and they're actually running fraud detection. They're trying to see, using machine learning techniques, is this the actual person who owns the card that is legitimately purchasing this item, or is it someone who's stolen their card or using their card illegally? What's happening here? And so in order to actually do this, though, you have to use machine learning. Because actually something interesting happened to me a few days ago where machine learning wasn't actually applied, and due to that, artificial intelligence almost ruined, not necessarily ruined, but delayed one of my projects by 2 months. And so what happened is, of course, there's actually another project that I'm working on called The Cognitive Story. And in this project, basically what I'm trying to do is give artificial communication ability to people who can't communicate naturally. And our first use case is actually for a quadriplegic girl who lives just north of Toronto, and her name is Boo. Now, we're actually working on using headsets to actually gather her electroencephalogram brain waves and convert that to human language using my deep learning algorithms. But the thing is, we've got really deep learning algorithms. Okay, and not just the actual learning algorithms, we've got a ton of data. 4,000 floating point brainwaves per second. So we've got a ton of data and really deep models. But at the same time, we need a device that can actually fit on Boo's headset, run off of battery, and at the same time not need to access the cloud, not need to access another computer, run standalone. Now that's a huge challenge. And so I thought, you know what? iPhone 10 will be able to do it, which so far it has been able to, and so I thought I'd pre-order it on launch day. And so, of course, I added, my credit card to Apple Pay, and what happened is, of course, in the middle, the bank actually asked me to verify my phone number. And so I verified the phone number, and as I pre-ordered, the pre-order went through because there was actually one instance, again in New Zealand, where I was, at the airport during a layover getting late for a flight, and, my dad used a credit card. We went onto the plane and realized, oh, the wallet's not on the plane. And so we actually had to deplane, go back over to the restaurant, get the wallet, and come back. Now, in that case, I would much rather have a 2-month iPhone delay than someone use my credit card. And so this is where artificial intelligence can really be used in two places at once. We can make it much more convenient for people because it'll actually understand when data points are important and when they're not important. And we can also make it much more secure. Because, like, for example, I had just made a purchase in New Zealand. The credit card company might have just thought that I'm making another purchase. But AI might have been able to actually take a look at this transaction history and say, hey, they just bought something from this restaurant. Why would they need to buy another thing that is so much more expensive? And so AI can come in there and make it more secure and more convenient for me. That's just one example. AI is being used in tons of other fields.
So there are 2 rules to this conversation. Rule number 1 is be crisp. And rule number 2 is never forget rule number 1. Because we've got a lot of ground to cover and I believe a lot of people want to ask you questions. So let's be a bit crisp.
Got it.
Okay, so this was, I guess, only the first question that we had. How many of you know coding? How many of you can code? Wonderful. How many of you are under 15?
Okay, so
And how many of you know coding? Just keep your hands raised.
okay.
And if you have to be under 15. Wonderful. So we have got a lot of interest from people who are young, who know coding, and who want to learn coding. Tanmay, since you started coding at the age of 5, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You're not faking it, you're 5. Huh? At the age of
started at
9,
5.
you had your first iOS app on, right, on Apple
At 9
Store.
years old.
Yeah?
Yes, Apple App Store.
How does one start to learn coding? Let us say if I have a cousin who is 7 years old, and if let us say someone is even 30 years old, where do they start?
Well, what I'd recommend really, and really what I believe, is that the only reason I was able to learn programming so quickly is because of the fact that I started at 5 years old. And this actually has a few different implications. In fact, I'd also like to refer back to Dr. Laura, I believe, the pediatrician, that mentioned if you can actually teach a child under the age of 6 to do something, they'll be really great at it later in life. And there is actually scientific proof behind that. Like, for example, raise your hand, everybody. How many of you have tried to look at 2 monkeys or other animals and tried to recognize their faces and tried to see if you can tell between 2 different monkey or any other animal's faces? Has anyone tried to do that? Okay, so a few people have tried to actually look at some other animals' faces and distinguish between them. Now, how many of you have been successful at doing that? How many of you have been successful at actually telling between their faces? Okay, so a few people, and most of them are sort of moderately good at it. And the reason you're not very good at it, and the reason people aren't able to do this very well, is because under, say, a year old, you can easily accomplish this task. You can very easily and very accurately distinguish between 2 monkeys' faces. It's very easy because you're born with so many billions of neurons that you'll never need in your life. And your brain realizes, hey, I'm never looking at monkey faces.
So,
I'm only looking at humans.
yeah. So if I have a nephew who is 5 years old, what do you think are the resources I should introduce him to?
Oh yeah, sure, definitely. So now really what I believe is, again, expanding on that point, so because of the fact that they're starting at 5 though, they need something that's interesting to actually, start coding. And so they can't just start with something like C. That'll be way too intimidating to begin with. But I'd recommend actually starting with something that teaches their programming concepts, but at the same time keeps it fun, keeps it interactive so that they're interested and attracted towards it. And then from there they can evolve to really whatever else they'd like to. Like, for example, Scratch is a great example of a block-based programming language where they learn all the right programming concepts, but at the same time, it remains very interesting for them. It remains this really sort of game sort of feel. It doesn't feel serious to them like they're coding. And so that gives them a very good start to the world of programming, from where they can actually start to evolve into, say, Swift Playgrounds, which is a good mix between block-based and text-based programming. From there, they can get into real languages like Python, Swift, Ruby, really whatever they feel comfortable with, and from there, expand to whichever languages they'd like. Of course, there are a few more resources like CodeMonkey, Code.org, Academy, and more, and I'd recommend seeing what works best for you or for your child.
So I think I would like to add to this point. I completely agree with you. The way a student is introduced to coding is really important. If you ask a child to code in C or C++, trust me, he'll be scared and he'll be like, this is not what I really want to do. I can't even do that. And they'll always think in their life that maybe a genius can do this, but I can't. I think it's really important how you introduce computers or coding to kids to make them the creators of the future.
Pretty interesting. So Tanmay, tell me one thing. What we see right now, that automation is happening everywhere. Mark Andreessen says software is eating the world, which is true. The cashier jobs are gone, the drivers, they say, are next in maybe 10 years. And a lot of jobs are being automated. What would your advice be? I'm using the word advice, intentionally, to people who want to make their career. So people who, young people who are in schools or in colleges, what do you think, what is your advice for a career next? Is technology career the next thing? Is it the only thing?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say it's the only thing. It's going to be the major thing that controls everything else, but it's not going to be the only thing that humans themselves can get into. Now, of course, you mentioned that artificial intelligence is replacing lots of jobs, and it is. Some very mundane, repetitive jobs, as you mentioned before, like the cashier jobs, driving jobs, these types of will be replaced by artificial intelligence. That's just how artificial intelligence is. But the point of AI is not to replace people's jobs. Instead, it is to shift the way that humans work themselves. Like just for right now, how the previous industrial revolutions allowed humans to focus less on things that don't matter and more on things that do matter, which is the only reason I'm here talking today. The only reason I'm able to use this microphone or the slides behind me. And so what I believe is that artificial intelligence is going to enable humans to work in other fields where they are required the most, and not just that, but also make it easier and create this more open field for them to get into. Like, for example, oncology. If you want to be a cancer specialist right now, it's a very, very intense process. It takes a lot of time. Only a few people actually get selected into it, and there's very little manpower left because there are all these other jobs that we're occupied with as humans. With AI, we can move them into these types of jobs and use AI to make it simple for them, lower that gap and make it so that they can actually into these types of fields where they are required the most.
I'm very optimistic about the future, but there are so many people who watch such movies and they come to me and say, oh my God, AI, you work in AI, oh my God, you're going to destroy the world, you're going to kill my jobs. What do you think? Should people be scared of AI?
Definitely not. And the reason I say this is because, think about this. When the very bare bone concepts for AI existed, or maybe even before that, because AI itself has existed for decades, even before I was born, but it hasn't really been applied since the past, say, 5 or 6 years. And so imagine what happened before we even knew what AI was, just when computers started to get to the point where we thought, this exponential growth will lead to artificial general intelligence. When we started to think that, when we, again, didn't even know the bare-bone AI concepts, we started to create things like books and movies that would represent what we thought technology would get to, what we thought technology would evolve into as artificial intelligence. We thought it would, destroy humanity, become more intelligent than humans. We thought it would do things it wasn't supposed to. However, eventually, as we worked with artificial intelligence and technology, we started to realize, oh, wait, that's not going to happen. And so that is all science fiction. It will never become an exact reality. Of course, people could always train AI to actually, do something bad, but that's being done with all technologies. And we're using those technologies to try and combat against the people who are using it for negative purposes. And so I believe we should not be afraid of AI at all because of the bare bone way that it's been developed. In fact, really the only reason I believe that people are afraid of AI, last thing I'd like to say here, is because the fact that they're not on the back end, because the fact that they're not developing it, they cannot see what AI is, they do not see what they should be expecting from AI, and therefore I think people like, researchers with AI should really be coming out and telling people about this is what you should expect from AI, this is what you shouldn't. Just like, I'm trying my best to do right now as well.
So as you said, that we should involve more people to be the creators and to contribute to development. What do you think are the resources? Because there are a lot of coders in India, people learn coding, and right now AI is so hot. But, we want to know which are the right resources we should look up to make a transition from being a programmer into being a data scientist?
Sure. Now, AI in data science is basically a next level of programming. If you don't know how to program, you won't be getting into fields like AI and data science because they themselves are not standalone things that you can learn. Of course, you have to learn about them, but they are algorithms and techniques that you implement in your programs. Like, for example, cleaning data, augmenting data, and then from there creating neural network architectures, training them, hyperparameter optimization, all these things you have to learn once you've learned to program. So what I'd recommend is if you are very familiar with programming and you want to get into AI, well, it really does depend on what you want to do in AI, but I'll take one example to keep it short for now. And that one example is like, for example, let's just say you want to get into the neural network architectures and you want to actually train and develop neural networks, like I'm very interested in. Then I'd recommend you learn languages like, of course, Python, and you start to learn different tools like Keras and TensorFlow through resources like YouTube. I have tons of different tutorials on my YouTube channel about Keras, TensorFlow, CUDA, and then from there expanding to say Udemy, Coursera, Udacity. These are all websites that have a great number of courses on all different topics inside of Keras and TensorFlow, CNTK, these types of libraries. So I'd recommend starting off by doing some research about artificial intelligence, neural networks, that type of stuff, data science, as you mentioned. See what you're interested in, and depending on what you're interested in, do further research down that field. If you're interested in the back end, do GPU development with CUDA. If you're interested in the mid end, do neural network design with Keras, TensorFlow, and Python. Depends on what you want to do.
Pretty cool. That's pretty interesting. So I think now we can open it up for the audiences. There were a lot of hands raised.
Yes.
And like always, I like to go to the backbenchers because they don't get the limelight. Let me see who's there. Can you guys stand up, please, at the end? Who wants to ask a question? Can you guys stand up?
Carefully ask the question because you can get a chance to have dinner with Tanmay Bakshi tonight.
Let's have that person standing up that side. On the
Where
right
is
corner.
Kapoorji?
So we need Kapoorji here to transfer the mic.
Hi Tanmay.
Where are you?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
My hand is
Oh, yes,
here.
I see.
Yeah, we can see your hand. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi. Thanks for giving us a good speech and inspiring us. And as I'm also working in IT and as a coding from last 5 years, my real question is like how AI can serve different give real value to companies and different businesses, right? I think the biggest challenge is not about technology. We have technology, machine learning, neural network, deep learning, but it's about people who can understand it easily and implement in their businesses. Okay, so how can we reduce the distance between the technology and the people who have different businesses and they can implement them?
Rule
So
number
what
2.
are your opinion about that?
Alright, rule number 2 for the audience as well as for us. Rule number 2 is never forget rule number 1. Rule number 1 is be crisp. Thank you.
For sure, I'll remember rule number 2. Okay, so now basically what I'd like to say here in brief is that as you mentioned, it's not the lack of the technology, it's not the lack of the hardware. Because the thing is that big enterprises always can invest in hardware. They can invest in the people to develop the deep learning algorithms, to actually develop the deep learning algorithms themselves. But what they cannot do is sort of, or at least what they have difficulty doing, is bridging the gap between the developers and the people who are telling the developers what to do, what to implement, and how, why are we implementing this sort of thing. And so that's a gap that can only be bridged when the developers and these teams that are deciding, what to do, why to do it, actually collaborate with each other. When they're collaborating with each other, what happens is these teams have a better understanding of what exactly AI is capable of, what it is not capable of, and what actually adds value to their business. What use cases are actually valuable to them. Like, for example, if you are in the finance field, what you may want to do is use artificial intelligence for, say, trading. There are tons of, different trading companies or financial companies that are investing a lot in artificial intelligence because they know that it can help them out a lot with its sort of predictive capabilities. If you're working in the healthcare field, you might want to use it for automatically diagnosing at a very early stage. If you're working in, one last example here, if you're working in, say, the for example, Rivigo, Indian company, trucking company, you might want to use AI to optimize your routes to make it so that we have the least breaks and the most time actually on the road. Depends on your business, depends on the use cases that you think you can actually implement. But then again, you have to have that sort of direct link and communication between the development team and the people who are actually deciding what and why to do things. So that they have a very clear understanding of what AI can and can't do, and they don't spend time deciding, oh, what should we do with AI? Instead, they just spend time on actually developing and designing the AI.
I think I would like to add to that point is to bridge the gap, we need to first understand, like we said, it's no magic. It's simply programming plus data and building a mathematical model on that data is what machine learning AI is. That's it. So you need to believe first that it's not a magic thing. You can do it, you can learn it. Everybody over here who knows a little bit of coding can learn machine learning and different mathematical models, yeah? So we'll take on the next question, Tanmay.
All right,
Kindly
let's
choose,
have a
yeah?
show of hands.
Oh,
I see a lot of hands. Okay, I'll come here because the lady in the red, she was earlier also waiting for the mic. So if Kapoorji could come and transfer the mic. Thank you.
So as you talked about some mental health institutions and about their penetration in various countries, now we are living in a country where this penetration is even worse. The youth don't even have access to internet, and artificial intelligence is a different story. So not thinking about the working of all these mechanisms, can you just just briefly explain how it is to be initiated? Like working is a far-fetched thing. First of all, it needs to be initiated.
Yes, sure. Now, what I believe is that, of course, in order for artificial intelligence to be powerful, it needs to be enabled. And now, as you mentioned, for example, in India, most people actually don't have access to internet in the first place. And so, what I believe is that if India wants these new technologies, these new innovations that are being, created to actually be useful by the general public, they need to do two things. They don't necessarily need to invest in artificial intelligence itself. They need to invest in what resonance, residual neural networks. They allow us to build much deeper neural networks, and yet at the same time, they don't sacrifice much. I mean, they do, but not as much computational performance. And yet at the same time, you don't really reach that bottleneck of layers. You can keep adding layers, and expect, at least up to a certain point, the accuracy to keep increasing. And so what I believe is that really mainly in order to develop better neural network architectures and algorithms, you have to keep developing algorithms themselves and trying out what you think would work. Because of the fact that we don't completely understand how neural networks or deep learning itself actually works right now, it's very difficult for us to say, oh, if this architecture isn't working, just do this, this, and this, and there we go, it'll start working. It's very difficult to say that. In fact, almost in some cases impossible, which is why I sometimes like to say that in some cases, neural network architecture development is sometimes more of an art than an actual science. It's trial and error, informed trial and error, until you get what you're trying to do correct. So that's really how you develop the next level of architectures. And again, like resonance, that wasn't anything planned. It's like, oh, we're going to develop deeper neural networks by connecting layers in a residual manner. Instead, what happened is they actually tried different methods out until they stumbled upon residual neural networks, and they realized why it works, which enabled us to create so many deeper, so much faster neural networks.
All right, only one question per audience, please. Kapoorji, please make once you give mic to someone, just take it back. Thank you. Okay, so
last question.
how about I guess we can have two more questions, Vikasi. Is that fine? Perfect. Tanmay, would you choose?
Okay, I see there's one more person waving his hand over there. There, perfect. We can get the microphone.
I think you've already asked a question. I'm so sorry because
the one behind. Yeah, that you. Perfect. You,
is that
Dhruv?
Dhruv? Is that Dhruv? Kapoorji? Either.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Siddharth and I study in Strawberry Fields High School, and I needed to ask that who inspired you the most in your family for doing artificial intelligence?
Well, I mean, in terms of specifically artificial intelligence, what I will say is that generally for coding, my dad originally got me interested into the field of sort of like coding and programming, because I mean, as you can imagine, at 5 years old, there's not much I have really to do all day. It's either I'm playing with something, or I'm doing some really small homework that I got from school, or I'm doing something of that sort. And so there's not much I would do all day, which means I would watch my dad programming. And because of the fact that I'd watch my dad programming, I would get really fascinated as to how does this computer work? How does it display my name on the screen? How does it add to numbers or even change the color of the screen? Right? This is so fascinating to me at 5 years old that I really want to find out how it works in the back end and what's actually going on behind there. How is it actually doing all of the things that we ask it to do? And how can we ask it to do things in the first place? And so my dad, saw that curiosity, was able to help me get into the field of sort of programming, not artificial intelligence, but programming, coding, from which point I created my first iOS app at 9 years old. In fact, interesting story, after I created my first iOS app and after I continued to create applications, I kind of started to lose sort of my interest in programming. But when I stumbled upon AI, that sort of got reinstated because I realized that now computers can do things that they never could have done before. So originally, getting back to your question, my dad originally, got me into the field of programming and coding, from which point I evolved eventually into the field of artificial intelligence. Thank you.
Interesting. So you lost interest in programming when people hear of the word programming.
So I would like, apart from your family, who else is your inspiration, or who's that personality in AI you look up to?
Well, if you're talking about specifically AI, then I have to say Elon Musk is one person that I really sort of love in the field of AI. And the reason I say that is because take a look at Tesla. What they did is they said, okay, AI is powerful. People aren't using AI right now, and where they are not doing a good job at it. Why don't we take AI and just implement it right now? Let's actually invest millions of dollars and actually develop the technology instead of saying, oh, we're developing it, right? Let's actually put it and actually create, a mass-produced vehicle that self-drives. And they did it. And they now have this Tesla autopilot that's already saved hundreds of lives. And imagine in the future will save thousands of, really countless more lives. And so I'd have to say Elon Musk for AI specific. But generally, Steve Jobs is sort of my main inspiration. Well, not necessarily, so inspiration I'd say, really because of the passion that he used to have for his work, sort of his attitude that he used to have for never giving up, is something that I really loved.
I hope Elon Musk is watching this video and invites you over to dinner.
I'd love that.
Alright, so we can have, I guess, one or two more questions. Okay, Tanmay, what do you do? I don't want to do this. There are too many hands.
How about the one in the orange there?
Yes.
Great.
Okay, and then let's go this side too. I mean, this side is ignored.
Oh yeah, perfect.
You mentioned about the incident when cycler, he took a pill and he sent his body data to IBM Watson. Do you think that this kind of technology can be really efficient? Because when he took the pill, it was not sure if he was going to get that bacteria infection. So should people be taking pill all the times just to get ensured that they don't have any bacteria infection?
Wonderful question. What's your name? What's your age?
Gurasis.
Gurasis. Which class are you in? Which grade you are in?
7th.
7th grade. Alright.
Great. That's actually a really good question.
Yeah.
And really what I believe there is that yes, it is completely safe to keep taking this pill, or in most cases you just take it one time and then from there, this is embedded in your body. You really rarely have to keep taking the pill. It's not like a daily thing. But generally the reason it's safe is because the pill itself doesn't have a biological effect. It doesn't contain any sort of chemical, like those other pills that you'd have for some sort of infection or for some sort of disease that you may have. that you need to take the pills for, it doesn't have any chemicals that actually work against anything in your body. It just has this sort of nanotechnology that enables Watson to track your body. And so it only contains a little bit of that technology that really does not do anything to you biologically. Instead, it only sort of tracks what's happening inside of your body. And then what it's able to do is, of course, take that data, send it to Watson, and then Watson can continually ensure that nothing wrong is happening. And that would actually be completely worth it to actually swallow that pill over and over again, because imagine you're developing this really serious disease. Say a really serious bacterial infection, or this really serious, say, cancer, for example, right? That's something that if you detect it early, you will definitely survive, or early enough, you will most probably survive. But if it's detected even a little late, oh, sorry, we can't fix it anymore. And this pill, what it can do is it can find out whether or not you have this type of disease in a very, very early way by actually detecting, not like the immune system, once the bacteria actually starts to fight with the body, then you actually sort of start realizing it's there. Instead, you realize it right as it's actually present. And so even before your body itself starts to feel that it's even there, the Watson pill has detected it, and now you can immediately fix it before it does anything to you. That enables much more, painless treatments. It enables much more. It enables many more people to live much longer lives and much healthier and much happier lives as well. So I definitely say that this is completely safe, and as long as the proper research is done into this field, and people are actually doing this in a very safe manner, and they're developing, these sorts of great pills with all the research and development done behind it, and all the testing done, it should be entirely safe for humans.
Rule number 2, yeah. All right. I'm sorry for enforcing this, but we are short of time and it's chilly. All right. We'll take the last question of the day. I think we can go this side because this side is totally ignored. And Tanmay, I would let you choose.
Person over there, small child I see holding his hand up. That one, perfect. Thank you.
I am Meet Mahajan of the Skywell School. You talked about the pill that we should take to see if we have any disease or something, and then you talked about people who commit suicide. I just want to combine these two things. If we take the pill, you said that it can analyze the data inside our body, and can it also analyze the data inside our brain that we are feeling depressed, or we are thinking of committing suicide or something?
Well, actually, technically, yes. It is oh, yeah, I mean, this is a great question. Thank you very much for asking that. What a really great question. And in fact, that's a great idea, taking the sort of health pill that we've already got and taking the sort of depression diagnosis. How about we combine that? But there are a few problems with that that the other, keeping them separate actually works around. Like, for example, if you're depressed, I don't think you'd be very comfortable actually taking a pill that's meant to actually diagnose whether or not you're depressed, right? You might, that may be a little bit too intrusive, you might think, right? Generally, if you're not okay with sharing that publicly, you might not be okay with buying that pill and taking it, just track your depression. So that's one problem that first of all we need to work around. But even then, it would be very, very difficult, if not impossible, with today's technology to actually track what's happening inside of your brain. We could track the impact of depression on your other organs. That's entirely possible. But then at that point, we're basically just doing the entire depression diagnosis thing, except instead of having it, non-intrusive like the Apple Watch or anything of that sort, we're doing it intrusively by actually, going inside of you and actually tracking there. There are a few advantages, like it's much more accurate readings. We can actually see the proteins, all the types of things flowing in your blood, all that sort of stuff, which could provide more clues. But in general, unless there's a very specific sort of use case that would require us to create a pill for it, I don't necessarily think that would be something that we do right now. But generally, though, that is a very good idea. Thank you for asking that.